Todd in turn 5 is P4 on softs. That Canadian guy is second on mediums. Jason short in turn 4 is P6. Best lap is a 1:25.862. Todd in Andretti hairpin is 4th. Chris Butt in rainy curve is P5. Best lap is a 1:25.422. Todd in the corkscrew is 4th. Illisvin Andretti hairpin is 3rd on softs. The race dictator is 1st. Best lap is a 1:23.159. Todd is 4th. Jason short in turn 11 is 6th. The race dictator in turn 3 is 1st. Todd is P3. Best lap is a 1:23.578. Jason short in Andretti hairpin is 5th. Best lap is a 1:24.317. That Canadian guy in turn 11 is 2nd. Jason short in Rahal straight is 5th. The race dictator in Andretti hairpin is first. Todd from New Zealand in turn 4 is P3. Best lap is a 1:23.341. Jason Short is P5. That Canadian guy in Andretti hairpin is P2. Best lap is a 1:23.221. Todd is third. The race dictator is P1 on mediums. Illis in Rahal Straight is P4. Jason Short in turn 6 is P5. Best lap is a 1:24.173. Illis is P4. Chris Butt in Andretti hairpin is 6th. That Canadian guy in turn 10 is first. Best lap is a 1:23.144. Jason Short is P4. Best lap is a 1:23.811. Todd is P3. Jason Short in Rahal Straight is P4. Todd from New Zealand in turn 3 is third. YH8 Racing from New Zealand in Rahal Straight is 7th on softs. Best lap is a 3:26.596. The qualification session is at Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey, USA. Todd from New Zealand is P19 on softs. The race dictator from New Zealand is first on mediums. Illis from New Zealand is P5 on mediums. That Canadian guy from Canada in turn 3 is second on softs. The race dictator in turn 6 is first. Todd in the corkscrew is P3. The race dictator is P1. The race dictator is up 18.56 in turn 4. The race dictator is up 18.84 in Rahal Straight. The race dictator is up 18.92 in turn 10. 5 minutes remaining in the session. The race dictator improved his first with a 1:23.255. That Canadian guy is provisional pole with a 1:22.971. Chris Butt is 7th. Chris Butt is up 21.76 in the corkscrew. Chris Butt is up 22.05 in turn 11. The race dictator in Rahal Straight is P2 up 0.50. The race dictator is up 0.70 in turn 11. The race dictator is provisional pole with a 1:22.587. Todd in turn 11 is 4th. Todd improved his third with a 123.858. 1.271 off pole. Chris Butt from New Zealand in rainy curve is P6 up 17.34 on softs. Chris Butt improved his sixth with a 125.349. 2.762 off pole. Chris Butt is up 0.21 in Andretti hairpin. That Canadian guy is second. That Canadian guy is up 0.38 in Rahal straight. That Canadian guy is up 0.48 in turn 10. That Canadian guy is provisional pole with a 122.291. Chris Butt in the corkscrew is sixth up 0.89. Chris Butt improved his P5 with a 124.652. 2.361 off pole. YH8 Racing from New Zealand is 7th up 0.12 on softs. Best lap is a 125.499. 3.208 off pole. YH8 Racing is up 0.26 in turn 6. That Canadian guy is provisional pole with a 122.257. YH8 Racing is up 0.40 in turn 10. YH8 Racing improved his 7th with a 125.488. 3.231 off pole. The qualifying session is now in overtime. Jason Short is 4th. Jason Short is up 0.99 in turn 10. YH8 Racing in turn 5 is 7th up 0.02. YH8 Racing is up 0.21 in rainy curve. YH8 Racing improved his P7 with a 125.005. 2.748 off pole. Broadcast bot is P20. The race session is at Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey, USA. That Canadian guy is first. The race dictator from New Zealand is P2 on mediums. Jason Short from New Zealand is third on softs. 15 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. The race dictator in Andretti hairpin is third. Jason Short is second. The race dictator in turn 5 is third. YH8 Racing from New Zealand in Rahal Straight is fourth on softs. YH8 Racing passed Illis for P3. YH8 Racing is now P2. Jason Short in the corkscrew is 7th. Jason Short passed Illis for 5th. Todd from New Zealand is second on softs. That Canadian guy from Canada in Andretti hairpin is P3 on mediums. Best lap is a 1:35.600. 1.005 off the fastest lap. Todd in turn 4 is second, 0.3 ahead of that Canadian guy. Todd lost second to that Canadian guy. Todd lost third to Chris Budd. That Canadian guy in turn 6 is second, 0.4 behind YH8 Racing. Jason Short in Rahal Straight on lap 2 is 5th, 0.3 behind Todd. That Canadian guy is second, 0.2 behind YH8 Racing. Illis from New Zealand in turn 11 is P6 on mediums, 0.6 behind Todd. That Canadian guy in turn 3 is second, 0.6 behind YH8 Racing. Jason Short is fourth, 1.5 behind Chris Budd. Jason Short was 2.0 faster last lap. That Canadian guy in the corkscrew is second, 0.7 behind YH8 Racing. The race dictator in Rahal Straight on lap 3 is P7, 1.0 behind Chris Budd. The race dictator passed Chris Budd for 6th. Chris Budd from New Zealand is 7th on mediums, 1.5 behind the race dictator. Todd in Andretti hairpin is 4th. Best lap is a 1:24.606. 0.982 off the fastest lap. 10 minutes remaining in the session. Chris Butt on lap 4 is 7th, 1.5 behind the race dictator. Todd in Rahal Straight is 4th, 1.1 behind Jason Short. Chris Butt in the Corkscrew is 7th, 0.2 behind the race dictator. Chris Butt passed the race dictator for P6. Todd is P4, 0.7 behind Jason Short. Chris Butt in Andretti hairpin is 6th, 3.5 behind Illisp. Todd is 4th, 0.8 behind Jason Short. Illisp in Rahal Straight is P5. Best lap is a 1:24.459. 1.504 off the fastest lap. YH8 Racing in turn 11 is 2nd, 0.4 behind that Canadian guy. Todd is 4th on softs, 0.7 behind Jason Short. Todd was 1.7 faster last lap. Chris Butt is 7th. Todd in turn 5 is P4, 0.5 behind Jason Short. Illisp in Rahal Straight is 5th. Todd in turn 10 is 4th, 0.7 behind Jason Short. Jason Short is P3, 0.9 ahead of Todd. Todd in turn 3 is P4. Best lap is a 1:23.596. 0.969 off the fastest lap. Illisp in turn 5 is P5. Best lap is a 1:24.339. 1.712 off the fastest lap. Todd in the corkscrew is P4, 0.9 behind Jason Short. Five minutes remaining in the session. Jason Short in turn 11 is P3, 1.0 ahead of Todd. Chris Butt entering the pits is P7. Todd in Andretti hairpin is P4, 1.0 behind Jason Short. Jason Short on lap 8 is P3, 1.3 ahead of Todd. Chris Butt exiting pits on mediums. Todd in Rahal straight is P3, 2.3 ahead of Jason Short. Illisv in rainy curve is 4th. The race dictator from New Zealand in rainy curve is P6. Illisv in turn 3 is 4th. Todd in turn 6 is 3rd. Illisv in the corkscrew is 4th on mediums. Todd is 3rd. The race dictator in turn 11 is P5. Best lap is a 1:23.621. 0.994 off the fastest lap. Jason Short exiting pits on softs. Todd is 3rd on softs. The race dictator from New Zealand in turn 5 is P5. Illisv in rainy curve is P4. The race dictator is 5th. Illisp in turn 3 is 4th, 4.6 behind Todd. That Canadian guy in rainy curve on lap 11 is 1st. The leader has just finished the race. That Canadian guy finished 1st. YH8 Racing is 2nd. YH8 Racing finished 2nd. Todd is P3. Todd finished P3. Illisp finished 4th. The race dictator finished P5. Jason Short finished 6th. Chris Butt is P7. Chris Butt finished P7. Broadcast bot is 8th. The race session is at Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey, USA. Chris Butt from New Zealand is 1st on mediums. Jason Short from New Zealand is P2 on softs. The race dictator from New Zealand is 3rd on mediums. 15 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. Jason Short in Andretti hairpin is 2nd. The race dictator is 2nd. Jason Short in turn 5 is 3rd. Jason Short lost P5 to that Canadian guy. Todd from New Zealand in the corkscrew is P2 on mediums. Todd is now third. Chris Butt in turn 10 is P3. That Canadian guy from Canada is P4 on mediums. Chris Butt in Andretti hairpin is third, 0.1 ahead of that Canadian guy. Chris Butt lost P3 to that Canadian guy. That Canadian guy is P3, 0.8 ahead of Chris Butt. Chris Butt in Rahal Straight is P4, 1.2 behind that Canadian guy. That Canadian guy in turn 10 is second. Best lap is a 1:35.987. 2.307 off the fastest lap. YH8 Racing from New Zealand is P4 on softs. Best lap is a 1:39.008. 13.722 off the fastest lap. That Canadian guy from Canada in turn 3 is second, 0.3 behind Illisv. YH8 Racing in turn 5 is P4. Best lap is a 1:25.206. 0.256 off the fastest lap. That Canadian guy in Rahal Straight is second, 0.4 behind Illisv. Jason Short is P6, 0.5 behind Chris Butt. Illisv from New Zealand is second on mediums battling that Canadian guy. That Canadian guy was 0.6 faster last lap. The race dictator in Andretti hairpin is P3, 0.8 behind Illisv. Illisv is second, 0.6 ahead of the race dictator. 10 minutes remaining in the session. The race dictator is P3, 0.5 behind Illisv. Jason Short in Rahal Straight is P5, 0.5 behind Chris Butt. The race dictator is third, 0.8 behind Illisv. Jason Short is fifth battling Chris Butt. Jason Short passed Chris Butt for P4. race dictator from New Zealand in turn 3 is P3, 0.4 behind Illusv. Chris Butt is P6, 0.2 behind YH8 Racing. Chris Butt was 9.6 faster last lap. The race dictator in turn 6 is third, 0.3 behind Jason Short. Jason Short was 0.6 faster last lap. YH8 Racing in Rahal Straight is P5, 0.4 behind that Canadian guy. The race dictator is third, 0.7 behind Jason Short. YH8 Racing is P5, 1.6 behind that Canadian guy. The race dictator from New Zealand in turn 4 is third, 0.5 behind Jason Short. Jason Short was 5.1 faster last lap. Chris Butt in turn 5 is P6. Best lap is a 1:24.053. 1.344 off the fastest lap. The race dictator from New Zealand is P3, 0.5 behind Jason Short. Chris Butt is P6, 1.0 behind YH8 Racing. The race dictator in Andretti Hairpin is P3. Best lap is a 1:23.639. 0.930 off the fastest lap. Chris Butt in turn 3 is P6, 1.0 behind YH8 Racing. The race dictator is third, 0.1 behind Jason Short. The race dictator lost P5 to Chris Butt. Chris Butt in Rahal Straight is P5, 0.2 behind YH8 Racing. Five minutes remaining in the session. Jason Short is P2 on softs, 2.7 behind Illusv. Chris Butt is fourth, 0.5 behind YH8 Racing. Jason Short is P2, 2.7 behind Illusv. Chris Butt in turn 5 is fourth. Best lap is a 1:23.485. 0.776 off the fastest lap. Jason Short in Rainy Curve is P2, 2.1 behind Illusv. The Race Dictator in Rainy Curve is 6th, 0.3 behind YH8 Racing. Jason Short is P2, 1.8 behind Illusv. The Race Dictator is 6th. Jason Short in Rahal Straight is 2nd, 1.4 behind Illusv. YH8 Racing in Rahal Straight is 6th, 0.4 behind the Race Dictator. The Race Dictator was 7.8 faster last lap. YH8 Racing lost P6 to Todd. That Canadian guy is P4, 0.7 behind Chris Butt. Jason Short in Turn 5 is P2, 1.5 behind Illusv. That Canadian guy is P4. Best lap is a 1:22.552. Jason Short on lap 10 is 2nd, 1.7 behind Illusv. That Canadian guy in Turn 11 is P4, 0.8 behind Chris Butt. Jason Short is 2nd, 1.4 behind Illusv. That Canadian guy is 4th. Jason Short in the Corkscrew is 2nd, 1.0 behind Illusv. Illusv in Rainy Curve is P1, 0.8 ahead of Jason Short. The leader has just finished the race. Illusv finished 1st. Jason Short finished 2nd. Chris Butt finished P3. That Canadian guy finished 4th. The Race Dictator finished 5th. Todd finished P6. YH8 Racing finished P7.